prophet Amos and all the prophets, when he says at the last judgment, we have in Matthew's Gospel the famous text about the last judgment, where Jesus tells us very honestly and very clearly that at the end of the day, when we stand before the King on that day of judgment, we will be asked only one set of questions, and they all will have to do of how we, you and I, treated poor people. When I was hungry, you gave me to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. When I was a stranger, you welcomed me into your home. When I was naked, you clothed me. And when I was sick, you visited me. Nobody, in those words of Jesus, gets into heaven without a letter of reference from the poor. Now, what does this mean for each one of us today? Because this is what I think God's word is challenging us to do today, is to reiterate and recommit ourselves to, as a church, to have a preferential option for the poor. First, the demand to live lives and reflect justice and real concern for the poor in an integral and non-negotiable part of our Christian discipleship. It's not something that is grounded in some particular ideology which I can buy or neglect. As long as I am living honestly and prayerfully in my private life, and as long as I'm saying my prayers and going to Mass and I'm good, that's all I need to do. It's not all we need to do, because justice is an integral part of our Christian way of life. It's not something that is an optional extra. It is at the center of the gospel message. What this mantra of the prophets and the teaching of Jesus at the last judgment also teaches is that charity alone is not enough. Charity is important, and we are all called to give and to help other people in their dire straits, and all of us do it, I'm sure. We wouldn't be here today if we weren't open and loving towards those who have not. But there's a difference between charity and justice. Justice seeks to find out why the situation is as it is, and then goes about to do something about it. Why is there such a gap between rich and poor in the world today? And charity won't solve that problem, but justice and charity will solve that problem. And all of us are called to be men and women of justice. Pope Paul VI said, if you want peace, work for justice. And that is our task as Christians, not as an optional extra, but as very much part of our Christian way of life, our Christian spirituality. And finally, the mantra of the prophets and the teaching of Jesus should be a challenge to personally scrutinize myself with the question, am I really reaching out to the poor? Do I have real orphans, widows, and strangers in my life? Is my commitment to the poor something in theory and is an ideal but not in practice? It is easy to pay lip service to the ideal, but it is very difficult to put it into practice. A contemplative Carmelite sister says, does your rhetoric about the poor actually help poor people, or does it help you to feel more comfortable about yourself. And so we need, as we reflect on God's word to us today, each one of us, to ask ourselves, do we have people in our lives that will give us a reference when the day comes? Are we really trying to get behind what is causing all the financial, moral, and other problems or challenges that exist in the world? Are we as church going to the source of these problems, and are we doing something about them? Are we lobbying to change things that are not right, or do we just sit back and let things happen? I think this is the challenge of Amos, and this is the challenge of Jesus today in the gospel. I concede that these are not easy questions, and we should be very slow to answer them. Sometimes all we can do is admit our helplessness. The Latin American theologian Grts once was talking about the church's preferential option for the poor. And one man stood up and said, "I feel so helpless about it. What can I do in the face of such poverty, in the face of such global injustice in our world today?" And Grts acknowledged the complexity of the question and sympathized with the man. But he said, minimally, make sure you always have at least one concrete poor person in your life to whom you are specially attending. This is what our gospel calls us today, is to reach out to the poor and also to examine why the situation exists as it does in the world, with this tremendous gap between rich and poor, and to seek justice for all. I'd like to end with a little story, the story of a man who was walking in a forest, and he happened to come across in the forest a lame fox. And he marveled at, how can a lame animal exist in a forest? So he sat down and he waited. A little while longer, a lion came with a buck in its mouth and lay down close to the fox. And then the lion started devouring the buck. But when the lion had its fill, he pushed the carcass across to the lame fox, and the fox could eat. And this man thought, oh, how wonderful our God is. I'm going to now sit down under a tree, and I am now going to wait for God to give me everything like he has given that fox. And so he sat down, and he waited, and he waited, and he waited until he was near to death, and he heard a voice saying, "Stop imitating the fox, imitate the lion." And I think that's what God is saying to us in his word today. Stop imitating the fox. Share who you are and what you have and all your gifts and all your talents with people who need you.